My name is Emma, and I am 30 years old. What started as a regular Thursday working as a project manager at a tech company turned into the most shocking violation of my personal boundaries I have ever experienced. I came home to find moving boxes, cluttering my hallway, my living room furniture completely rearranged, and my 27-year-old sister-in-law Ashley sitting on my couch at 7 months pregnant, like she had been living there for weeks. My father, Richard, had used his emergency key to move her in without my knowledge or permission while I was at work. The deepest betrayals come from those you trust most. Before I share this unbelievable story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had family members completely disregard your boundaries and make major decisions about your home without asking. This house was not just any ordinary house. It represented 4 years of working 60-hour weeks, carefully budgeting every expense, and sacrificing weekend trips to save for a down payment. My husband Jake and I had purchased this beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom craftsman home in a quiet tree-lined neighborhood just 10 months ago. The house featured original hardwood floors, an updated kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, and a spacious living room with built-in bookshelves. The master bedroom had a walk-in closet and a bathroom with a soaking tub I had dreamed about for years. Every corner of this 1,600-square-foot home represented our hard work and dedication to building our future together. The backyard had a vegetable garden I had planted and a deck where Jake and I enjoyed barbecues with friends. When we first moved in, we decided to give my father, Richard, an emergency key. It seemed like the responsible thing to do at the time. I worked long hours managing software development projects, often staying late for client calls with overseas teams. Jake traveled frequently for his consulting job, sometimes for weeks at a time. My father lived about 30 minutes away and could handle emergencies, accept deliveries, or check on the house when we were both traveling. Initially, he respected our trust and only used the key when we explicitly asked for his help. My relationship with my sister-in-law Ashley had always been complicated. Ashley was Jake's younger sister, and at 27, she still seemed to expect the world to revolve around her needs and desires. She had been married to her husband Derek for 3 years, but their relationship was constantly volatile. Ashley had a tendency to create drama in every situation, and then expect family members to fix whatever problems resulted from her poor decisions. Ashley had strong opinions about every aspect of Jake's and my life, from our career priorities to how we decorated our home. When Jake and I announced we were buying a house, Ashley immediately started offering unsolicited advice about what neighborhood would be better for property values, what size house we really needed, and even suggested we should consider a 4-bedroom place so family members could stay comfortably when visiting. There was always an underlying assumption that our choices should somehow accommodate her preferences or convenience. There was a consistent pattern to Ashley's behavior that I had observed over the 5 years I had been with Jake. She would make assumptions about what other people should do for her, create conflict when reality did not match her expectations, and then play the victim when confronted about her unreasonable demands. Last summer, she announced during a family barbecue that she and Derek would be staying with us for 2 weeks while their apartment was being renovated, without ever asking if that timing worked for us. When I mentioned we had already planned a staycation during that period, she burst into tears and accused me of being unsupportive of family. Another incident occurred when Ashley decided to use our address to have expensive purchases delivered while we were out of town, claiming her apartment's mailroom was unreliable. She ordered over $800 worth of home decor items that we had to accept and store until she could pick them up a week later. When I expressed concern about using our address without permission, she dismissed my feelings, saying, "I did not think you would mind helping out family. It is not like it cost you anything." During Jake's and my wedding planning, Ashley inserted herself into numerous decisions, despite not being given any official role in the planning process. She contacted our florist to suggest different arrangements, called our photographer to request specific shots be included, and even tried to change our reception music by speaking directly to the DJ. When I confronted her about overstepping boundaries, she claimed she was just trying to help make our wedding perfect and accused me of being ungrateful for her helpful suggestions. Derek, Ashley's husband, was a quiet accountant who seemed constantly overwhelmed by his wife's impulsive behavior. Whenever Ashley would create drama or make unreasonable demands, Derek would quietly try to diffuse the situation or suggest compromises. However, he never directly challenged her behavior, which only enabled Ashley to continue believing her actions were acceptable. I often felt sorry for Derek, who seemed to spend most of his energy managing the fallout from Ashley's decisions, rather than pursuing his own interests or goals. My father Richard had his own history of boundary violations, though they had escalated since my mother died 3 years ago. Since becoming a widower, he had become increasingly involved in my personal life, often in ways that felt intrusive and inappropriate. He would show up at our old apartment unannounced, claiming he was just in the neighborhood, even though he lived across town. Once, while Jake and I were on vacation, he took it upon himself to have our bathroom faucet replaced because he thought it looked outdated. We returned home to find our perfectly functional fixture gone and a bill for work we never requested. Richard also had a habit of offering unsolicited financial advice despite knowing I worked in project management and had successfully managed my own finances for over a decade. He would email me articles about investment strategies and retirement planning with notes like, "You should really consider this approach instead." When I tried to explain that I was capable of making these decisions independently, he would dismiss my expertise with comments like, "I have been handling money since before you were born." There were multiple occasions when Richard would invite extended family members to our home without checking with us first. Once I came home from work to find my father and 2 of his brothers watching a basketball game in our living room. Another time he brought his neighbor and the neighbor's teenage daughter to our house for dinner, calling me only an hour beforehand to say, "We will be there at 7. I hope you have enough food for everyone." Despite having several conversations about respecting our independence and privacy, both Richard and Ashley continued to cross boundaries regularly. Jake often found himself caught in the middle, torn between loyalty to his sister and supporting our relationship. Richard, as my only remaining parent, used emotional manipulation whenever I tried to establish limits, saying things like, "I just want to be part of your life," or "This is what families do for each other." Little did I know that their boundary violations were about to escalate to a completely new level that would test every relationship in our family. The current crisis with Ashley began about a month ago. She was 7 months pregnant with her and Derek's first child, a girl they planned to name Sophia. While the pregnancy had been progressing normally medically, it had apparently created significant stress in Ashley and Derek's marriage. From what Jake had told me, Ashley's spending habits had become increasingly problematic during her pregnancy. She had purchased an entire nursery furniture set from an expensive boutique, costing over $4,000. She had also insisted on completely redecorating their 2-bedroom apartment, claiming everything needed to be perfect and non-toxic before the baby arrived. Derek, who had recently learned his accounting firm was downsizing and his hours would be reduced, had finally confronted Ashley about their mounting debt. The breaking point came when Derek discovered Ashley had secretly opened a new credit card and charged nearly $2,000 in baby clothes from high-end brands, many of which were newborn sizes that the baby would outgrow within weeks. When he confronted her about the financial irresponsibility, a massive argument erupted. According to Jake, who heard the story directly from Derek, Ashley had thrown a picture frame at the wall and screamed that Derek obviously did not care about their daughter's well-being. "How can you be so selfish about our baby?" she had reportedly yelled. "Do you want Sophia to have nothing while all the other babies in our neighborhood have beautiful things?" Derek had responded by pointing out that they were now over $20,000 in debt with a baby coming and reduced income. The argument escalated until Derek announced he needed some space and would be staying with his college roommate Marcus for a few days to think things through. He packed a bag and left that evening, telling Ashley they could talk when they had both calmed down. This temporary separation sent Ashley into a complete emotional spiral. She immediately called Jake, sobbing hysterically, that Derek had abandoned her and their unborn daughter. Jake spent over 3 hours on the phone with her that night, trying to reassure her that Derek just needed time to process their financial situation and would likely return within a few days. But Ashley was inconsolable, insisting she could not stay in their apartment alone while pregnant. "What if something happens to the baby? What if I go into early labor and nobody is there to help me?" she kept repeating, despite living in a ground-floor apartment and having no pregnancy complications. Jake had gently suggested she could stay with their parents temporarily, but Ashley refused, claiming their mother would just lecture her about money management and stress her out even more. Jake then cautiously suggested she could potentially stay with us for a very short time if absolutely necessary, but emphasized he would need to discuss it with me first before making any decisions. This is where my father Richard inserted himself into the situation. Ashley, apparently unwilling to wait for our answer or risk being told no, called Richard the next day. I later learned that she had painted a dramatically exaggerated picture of being abandoned by her husband while heavily pregnant and having absolutely nowhere safe to stay. She told Richard that Jake had offered our home as a solution, but that I was being difficult and unreasonable about helping family during a crisis. Richard, always eager to position himself as the family hero, immediately took Ashley's side, without hearing any other perspective. He called her back that same afternoon with a solution that completely bypassed my input or consent. "Do not worry about Emma," he had told her. "I have an emergency key to their house. We do not need to wait for her permission. Family helps family, and you need support right now." Together, they developed a plan that was both manipulative and invasive. Richard would help Ashley move her essential belongings into our house while I was at work, and Jake was traveling for business. By the time I returned home that evening, Ashley would be settled in, making it much more difficult for me to object or ask her to leave. What infuriated me most when I later discovered this scheme was that Ashley had not even attempted to explore other options. She had not called any of her numerous friends from college or work. She had not reached out to her own sister, Michelle, who lived just 20 minutes away and had a guest room. She had not even tried to have a calm conversation with Derek about returning home, which Derek later told us he had been hoping would happen within a day or two. No, Ashley had deliberately chosen the option that would create the most drama and disruption in our lives while requiring the least effort or compromise from her. My father had eagerly enabled this plan, completely disregarding my right to have any say in who lives in my own home. The betrayal felt devastating from both directions. My father, who should respect my autonomy as a married adult, and my sister-in-law, who had once again demonstrated that she considered my comfort and boundaries less important than her immediate desires. They had conspired behind my back, using a key that was entrusted for genuine emergencies to force a living situation I had no voice in creating. Neither of them had considered how this would affect my marriage, my work stress, or my sense of safety and privacy in my own home. Neither had thought about the implications of moving a high-maintenance, emotionally volatile, heavily pregnant woman into someone else's space without permission or discussion. All they cared about was what Ashley wanted in the moment, and my feelings were completely irrelevant to their decision-making process. As I would soon discover, the actual execution of their plan was even more presumptuous and invasive than I could have imagined. That Thursday had started like any other workday. I woke up at 6:45 a.m., made my usual coffee and toast, and prepared for a day of client meetings and project deadlines at the software company where I worked as a senior project manager. Jake had left 2 days earlier for a business trip to Seattle and would not be returning until Friday evening. We had video chatted the night before, and he mentioned he had back-to-back client presentations, but would call me during his lunch break. I arrived at the office around 8:30 a.m., settled into my cubicle, and dove into preparing a presentation for an important client meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. The morning passed quickly with emails, phone calls, and project updates. I had just finished lunch at my desk when my phone rang around 1:15 p.m. It was Mrs. Henderson, our 68-year-old retired neighbor, who kept an informal watch on the neighborhood during weekday business hours. "Emma, honey," she said, her voice filled with concern. "I wanted to check if everything is okay at your house. There has been a moving truck in your driveway for the past 2 hours, and people have been carrying boxes and furniture inside all morning." My stomach immediately dropped. A moving truck. "Are you absolutely sure it is at our house, Mrs. Henderson?" I asked, hoping there had been some mistake. "Oh yes, definitely your house. I can see your father's silver Honda in the driveway too. I thought maybe you were having some work done or furniture delivered, but it really looks like someone is moving in," she explained. I thanked her for calling and immediately tried to reach my father on his cell phone. No answer. I then called Jake, but as expected, he was in his presentation and could not take the call. With a growing sense of dread and anger, I told my manager I had a family emergency and needed to leave work immediately. The 25-minute drive home felt like an eternity. My mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. I kept hoping there was some reasonable explanation, that maybe Richard was helping with a furniture delivery I had forgotten about or handling some emergency repair. But deep down, I knew something much worse was happening. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the scene confirmed my worst fears. A small moving truck was indeed parked there, along with my father's car and Ashley's white SUV. My front door was propped open with a doorstop, and I could hear voices and movement inside my house. I walked through my own front door to find my hallway completely blocked with cardboard boxes labeled Ashley's clothes, baby stuff, and bedroom items. My normally organized living room had been transformed into what looked like a temporary bedroom. The coffee table had been pushed against the wall, my area rug rolled up and shoved in a corner, and a borrowed air mattress was inflated in the center of the room where my seating area used to be. In the middle of this chaos stood Ashley, directing my father as he attempted to hang blackout curtains over my living room windows. She was wearing maternity leggings and an oversized sweater that stretched over her pregnant belly, looking completely comfortable and at home in my disrupted space. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with shock and fury. Both Ashley and my father turned around, startled by my sudden appearance. Ashley recovered first, offering a bright smile as if nothing unusual was happening. "Oh, Emma, you are home early from work. Richard has been so helpful getting me settled in. I hope you do not mind that we had to move some of your furniture around. I need space for the air mattress until after Sophia is born." "Settled in? Until after the baby is born?" I repeated, struggling to process what I was hearing. "Ashley, nobody invited you to live here, especially not for the next 2 months." My father stepped down from the stepladder he had been using, his expression a mixture of defensiveness and misplaced righteousness. "Now, Emma, do not overreact to this situation. Ashley is family and she needs our help right now. Derek has left her and she cannot be alone in her condition." "Derek did not leave her," I corrected, remembering what Jake had told me about their argument. "They had a fight about money, and he is taking a few days to cool off. That does not give either of you the right to move her into my house without even asking me." Ashley's eyes immediately filled with tears, a response I had witnessed many times when she did not get her way or faced any resistance to her plans. "I knew you would react like this," she said, her voice taking on a martyred tone. "Jake said it would be fine for me to stay here temporarily. I have nowhere else safe to go, and I am 7 months pregnant. Emma, do you really want me to be homeless?" I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm despite the obvious manipulation and the blatant lies. Jake might have mentioned the possibility of you staying here briefly, but he certainly did not agree to you moving in today without any discussion with me first. And you have plenty of other places you could stay, Ashley. Your parents' house, Michelle's guest room, any number of your friends. "None of them have adequate space for me and all my pregnancy needs," she countered, though I knew this was completely false. Her sister Michelle had a 3-bedroom house with only 1 child. Besides, their houses have too many stairs, which could be dangerous for me right now. The excuses were endless and increasingly transparent. I turned to my father, who I felt had committed the greater betrayal in this situation. "Dad, how could you use your emergency key like this? That key was meant for actual emergencies, not for moving people into my house without my knowledge or permission." Richard crossed his arms defensively, his posture becoming more rigid. "This is an emergency, Emma. Ashley needs help, and this is what families do for each other. I am honestly disappointed that you are being so selfish and cold-hearted right now." "Selfish?" I echoed in disbelief. It is selfish to want some control. Over who lives in my own home? A home that Jake and I worked for years to afford? "This house is part of the family too, in a way," Richard said, his sense of entitlement shocking me. "I am your father, and I helped you with the down payment. You cannot just shut out family when they need support. You gave us a gift of $3,000 toward a $280,000 house," I clarified, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "That was generous, but it does not make this your house, or give you the right to make decisions about who lives here." Ashley sat down heavily on the air mattress, one hand protectively cradling her belly, her expression pained and dramatic. "Please stop yelling," she said weakly. "All this stress is not good for Sophia. I cannot believe you are making such a huge deal about helping family during a genuine crisis." I looked around at my invaded home, my personal space now filled with someone else's belongings and rearranged without my input or consent. The violation felt physical and emotional, like having my sense of security and autonomy ripped away. These two people, who should respect me and my boundaries, had conspired behind my back and used a key meant for emergencies to fundamentally alter my living situation. "Both of you need to leave right now," I said, my voice low but steady with determination. "Ashley, call Derek or Michelle or whoever you want, but you cannot stay here without my agreement." "Dad, I want my emergency key back immediately." "I'm not going anywhere," Ashley said firmly, her tears stopping as quickly as they had started. "I have nowhere else safe to go. Jake already said I could stay, and I am not moving while I am this pregnant." "And I am not giving back the key," my father added, his tone becoming more combative. "Not when you are acting this irrationally and selfishly. You will thank me later when you calm down and realize this was the right thing to do." In that moment, I realized this situation was not going to be resolved through reasonable discussion or appeals to basic respect. They had no intention of acknowledging my wishes or leaving my home voluntarily. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and called Jake, hoping he could at least talk some sense into his sister. The confrontation was just beginning, and I had no idea how much worse things were about to become. Jake finally returned my call around 4:45 p.m. after his client presentations had concluded for the day. I had spent the intervening hours in a state of barely controlled anger, essentially confined to my bedroom while Ashley and my father continued, settling her belongings throughout my house. I could hear them moving furniture, opening and closing cabinets, and making themselves completely at home. I explained the entire situation to Jake in detail, trying to keep my voice low so they would not overhear our conversation. "They did what?" Jake exclaimed, clearly shocked and angry. "Emma, I told Ashley we would need to discuss any arrangement with you first. I never gave her permission to just move in while we were both away." "Well, she is here now," I replied bitterly, "with enough belongings to stay for months, apparently. Your sister and my father decided they had the authority to make decisions about our home without consulting either of us." Jake was quiet for a long moment before sighing heavily. "I will be home tomorrow evening. Just try to keep things peaceful until then, okay? We will figure this out when I get back." His response disappointed me deeply. I had hoped for immediate support, a clear statement that he would back me completely in demanding they leave our home. Instead, he seemed to be taking a cautious wait-and-see approach, unwilling to confront the situation directly from a distance. "So I am just supposed to accept this invasion for the next 24 hours?" I asked, hurt evident in my voice. "It is just one night, Emma," he replied, his tone attempting to be soothing but coming across as dismissive. "Ashley is pregnant and emotional right now. Let us not escalate this into something more dramatic than it needs to be." That comment stung deeply. My husband was minimizing a serious violation of our home and privacy as mere drama. I ended the call shortly after, feeling increasingly isolated and unsupported in my own distress. When Jake finally arrived home Friday evening, the situation had deteriorated significantly. Ashley had completely taken over the guest bathroom, filling every surface with her pregnancy vitamins, specialized creams, and toiletries. She had also rearranged our kitchen cabinets to make room for her herbal teas, prenatal snacks, and supplements. My father had made several additional trips to Ashley's apartment, bringing more of her belongings each time. By Friday evening, it looked like she had moved in permanently rather than temporarily. Jake and I retreated to our bedroom for a private conversation as soon as he walked through the door. I could see from his expression that he was shocked by the extent of the takeover, having expected perhaps one suitcase rather than what appeared to be a complete relocation. "This is way more extensive than I thought it would be," he admitted, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "But Emma, she is my sister and she is pregnant. I cannot just throw her out onto the street." "Nobody is talking about the street, Jake," I said, struggling to keep my voice calm and reasonable. "She has multiple options available to her. She could stay with your parents, with Michelle, with any of her friends. She could even go back to her own apartment and work things out with Derek, which is what should happen anyway. Jake sat on the edge of our bed looking conflicted and exhausted. I know you are right, but she seems really devastated right now. Derek apparently said some harsh things about her spending habits, and she feels completely abandoned. Could we maybe let her stay just for a weekend until things settle down? Just a few days at most? I could not believe what I was hearing. My own husband was suggesting we accommodate an invasion of our home that had been executed without our permission or knowledge. So you are taking her side? I asked, the hurt and betrayal clear in my voice. After she and my father went behind both of our backs and used the emergency key to move her in while we were away? I am not taking sides, Jake protested weakly. I am just trying to find a solution that works for everyone involved. She is family, and she is in a really vulnerable state right now. Being pregnant does not give her the right to take over our home, I countered firmly. And being family does not mean we have to accept complete disrespect of our boundaries and autonomy. We argued back and forth for nearly an hour, with Jake torn between loyalty to his sister and support for his wife. Eventually, he reluctantly agreed that Ashley could not stay long-term in our home, but he still wanted to offer her a few more days to make alternative arrangements. When we finally emerged from our bedroom, we found my father and Ashley in the kitchen preparing dinner using our groceries without asking permission. Ashley was sitting at our kitchen island, scrolling through her phone and occasionally directing my father as he cooked. We need to have a serious conversation about this situation, I announced firmly as we entered the room. What followed was one of the most frustrating and infuriating conversations of my entire life. My father continued defending his actions, insisting he had done the morally right thing by helping family during a crisis. He dismissed my concerns about boundaries and consent as petty and selfish in the face of Ashley's emergency situation. What kind of daughter refuses to help a pregnant woman in distress? He asked, as if I had suggested throwing Ashley into traffic, rather than expecting her to use one of her many other available housing options. Ashley, for her part, alternated between tearful manipulation and righteous indignation. She frequently touched her pregnant belly as if to remind us all of her condition, and spoke repeatedly about how stressful the situation was for the baby. She continued insisting that Derek had abandoned her, which was still completely untrue, and that she had nowhere else safe to stay, which was also false. My doctor specifically said I need to avoid stress for Sophia's development, she said through tears. I just need a calm, stable place to stay until Derek comes to his senses and realizes how badly he has treated me. Jake, weakened by his sister's emotional manipulation, suggested once again that she could stay for just a few more days while she figured out a more permanent solution. This only encouraged Ashley further. Actually, she said, her tears stopping, with suspicious speed, I was thinking I should probably stay until after Sophia is born. The nursery at our apartment is not finished, and with Derek being so unpredictable and unreliable right now, I need to be somewhere stable and supportive. I nearly choked on my own breath. Until after the baby is born? That is over 2 months away. Absolutely not. See how selfish and heartless she is being, my father said to Jake, as if I were not even present in the room. Her own sister-in-law needs help during the most vulnerable time in her life, and she cannot spare a corner of this big house for a few weeks. I felt like I was losing my mind. No one seemed willing to acknowledge the fundamental issue that they had moved Ashley in without permission, using a key meant for emergencies, and had rearranged my home without any consent. This is not about whether Ashley needs help, I tried to explain for what felt like the 100th time. This is about basic respect and boundaries. You cannot just decide to move someone into another person's home without their permission. Family does not need permission to help family, my father countered, repeating a phrase he had used several times already. Feeling increasingly cornered and desperate, I finally issued a clear ultimatum. Ashley, you have exactly 24 hours to find somewhere else to stay. This is not negotiable or open for discussion. My father's face reddened with anger. That is completely unreasonable. She is not going anywhere, and I will stay here too if necessary to make sure you do not bully her while she is in such a vulnerable condition. You most certainly will not stay here, I snapped back. This is my house, not a family commune. This is Jake's house too, Ashley interjected, looking to her brother for support. And he wants me to stay here. Do not you, Jake. Put on the spot, Jake stammered something non-committal about wanting to help family while also respecting my feelings. His wishy-washy response only emboldened Ashley and my father even more. "It is settled then," Ashley announced with satisfaction. "I will stay here until after Sophia is born, maybe even longer, since I will need help adjusting to life with a newborn." That night was one of the most uncomfortable and sleepless nights of my entire life. Ashley completely took over the living room, turning the television volume up loud, as she watched reality TV shows until well past midnight. My father stayed until nearly 11 p.m., bringing in even more of Ashley's belongings, including a pregnancy exercise ball and a special humidifier she claimed was necessary for her health. I lay awake beside Jake, feeling betrayed not just by my father and sister-in-law, but also by my husband's inability to stand firmly with me against this invasion of our home. The walls of my own house felt like they were closing in on me, my personal space and autonomy completely stripped away by people who claimed to love and care about me. Tomorrow, I decided as I finally drifted into uneasy sleep, would have to be different. I would not allow this situation to continue, no matter what measures became necessary to reclaim my home and my peace of mind. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of unfamiliar voices coming from my kitchen. Throwing on a bathrobe, I walked out to discover that Ashley had invited her friend Jennifer over for breakfast. They were using my good china and had prepared an elaborate spread of pancakes, fresh fruit, and yogurt parfaits, creating a complete mess that covered every counter surface in my kitchen. "Oh, good morning, Emma," Ashley said brightly when she saw me, as if this was perfectly normal behavior. "I hope we did not wake you up." Jennifer came over to help me organize some of my things, and I made enough breakfast for everyone. I stood frozen in the doorway, taking in the scene before me. Less than 48 hours after moving into my home without permission, Ashley was already hosting social gatherings and using my belongings as if they were her own. "Ashley," I said, keeping my voice carefully measured despite my rising anger. "You cannot invite people over to my house without asking permission first. This is not your home." Jennifer looked uncomfortable and embarrassed, glancing nervously between Ashley and me. Ashley merely rolled her eyes dismissively. "Jennifer is just helping me set up the baby corner in the living room. We are not bothering anyone or getting in your way." "Baby corner?" I repeated, my alarm growing rapidly. "Ashley, you are not staying here long enough to need a baby corner." "We will see about that," she muttered under her breath, turning back to her friend as if dismissing me from my own kitchen. I retreated to my bedroom to get dressed for work, my mind racing with anger and disbelief. The situation was clearly escalating far beyond what I had anticipated. This was no longer about a temporary stay during a marital disagreement. Ashley was obviously planning to establish a permanent residence in my home, complete with social gatherings and baby preparations. When I returned to the kitchen, my father had arrived and was carrying in yet another box of Ashley's belongings. He barely acknowledged my presence as he passed through to the living room, where I could hear him and Jennifer discussing the best placement for Ashley's rocking chair. "Dad," I called, following him into the living room. "We need to talk immediately." He reluctantly stepped into the hallway with me, his expression already defensive and dismissive. "I want my emergency key back right now," I stated firmly and clearly. "You have completely abused the trust we placed in you by using it to move Ashley in without our permission." "I am not giving it back," he replied without any hesitation. "Not when you are being so unreasonable and cruel about helping family. The key stays with me in case Ashley needs anything while you and Jake are at work." His blatant refusal stunned me completely. "That key was meant for emergencies only, not for you to enter our home whenever you want or to move people in without our knowledge." "You clearly do not understand what real family means," he said, his tone condescending and dismissive. "When I was growing up, we helped each other without all these selfish conditions and rigid boundaries you seem so obsessed with maintaining." "This is not about being selfish," I insisted, my frustration mounting rapidly. "This is about basic respect and common decency. You do not move into someone else's house without their permission, family or not." Our argument grew louder and more heated, eventually attracting Ashley's attention. She waddled over, one hand pressed against her lower back and the other protectively, cradling her pregnant belly. "Why are you shouting at Richard?" she demanded accusingly. He has been nothing but helpful and supportive during this horrible time in my life. Unlike some people, he actually cares about my well-being and Sophia's health. This is not about whether I care, I tried to explain through my mounting frustration. This is about the fact that you two conspired to move you into my house without asking me. That is not acceptable under any circumstances. I had absolutely nowhere else safe to go, Ashley insisted, her voice rising dramatically. What kind of person refuses to help a pregnant woman whose husband has completely abandoned her? Derek did not abandon you, I corrected for what felt like the 1,000th time. And you have multiple other places you could stay. Your parents' house, Michelle's guest room, any number of your friends' places. None of them have adequate space. For all my needs, she lied again smoothly. Michelle's house has too many stairs, which could be dangerous for me in my condition. And my parents' place is too stressful because Mom will just lecture me about money management. The excuses were endless and increasingly transparent with each repetition. I turned back to my father, who was watching our exchange with obvious disapproval of my position. Dad, this is the absolute last time I am going to ask politely. Please, give me back my house key. No, he said flatly and definitively. I do not trust you to make the right decision in this situation. You are being selfish and cruel to Ashley during her time of greatest need. Something inside me snapped completely at his words. I was being characterized as the villain for simply wanting autonomy over my own home, for expecting basic respect for my boundaries and consent. Fine, I said, my voice cold and determined. Consider this your formal notice. You are both trespassing in my home. I want both of you to leave today. Ashley's eyes widened in theatrical shock and disbelief. You cannot just kick out a pregnant woman. Jake would never allow such cruelty. Jake and I will discuss this situation tonight, I replied firmly. But my position is absolutely clear. This arrangement was made without my consent, and I do not agree to it continuing. My father stepped closer to me, his expression hardening with anger. If you keep pushing this issue, Emma, I will make sure everyone in our extended family knows exactly how you treated your pregnant sister-in-law. How you put your selfish desire for privacy above helping family in a genuine crisis. Is that really the reputation you want? His threat was clear and manipulative. Comply with their demands or face family ostracism. It was emotional blackmail, but not surprising, given his behavior throughout this entire situation. I left for work shortly after, unable to continue the argument without saying something I would definitely regret later. Throughout the day, I received a constant stream of text messages from Ashley requesting that I pick up various items on my way home, as if I had somehow agreed to become her personal assistant and errand runner. My father also sent several texts with links to articles about the importance of family support during pregnancy, as if internet articles could somehow justify their complete violation of my boundaries. When I returned home that evening, I discovered two more deeply alarming developments that made it clear this situation was spiraling completely out of control. First, while looking for an important work document in my home office, I found a handwritten list in Ashley's distinctive handwriting titled Nursery Items Needed for Emma's House. It included cribs, changing tables, baby monitors, and clothing, with a note at the bottom reading, "Order by next week for delivery to living room." Second, and even more disturbing, I discovered that my father had actually changed the locks on our front door without telling Jake or me. I only realized this when my house key would not work when I tried to enter. When I confronted him about it, he casually mentioned that he had upgraded our security and would give me the new keys once you start being reasonable about Ashley's living situation. These discoveries made something crystal clear to me. This was no longer simply about helping Ashley through a temporary difficult period in her marriage. This was about complete control over my living space. My father and Ashley were systematically taking over my home, making permanent changes without any permission, and establishing a situation where they controlled every aspect of my own housing arrangement. I found Jake in our bedroom when he returned from work that evening, looking exhausted from his business trip. His expression grew increasingly concerned as I recounted the day's escalating events. "They changed our locks, Jake," I emphasized, still barely able to believe it myself. "Without asking us or even telling us they were going to do it. And Ashley is planning to set up a complete nursery here. She clearly intends to stay indefinitely. Jake ran both hands over his face in frustration and disbelief. This has gone way too far, he finally admitted with obvious regret. I was willing to help Ashley temporarily, but they are completely overstepping every reasonable boundary. What are we going to do about this? I asked, relieved that he finally seemed to fully understand the gravity of what was happening. I will have a serious conversation with Ashley tonight, he promised firmly. And we need to address your father's behavior too. This absolutely cannot continue. But the conversation did not go remotely as planned. When Jake attempted to set clear boundaries with his sister, Ashley immediately burst into dramatic tears, claiming that all the stress was endangering her pregnancy and potentially harming the baby. My father accused Jake of being under Emma's controlling influence and abandoning his own sister when she needed family support most. The discussion escalated quickly until Ashley suddenly clutched her belly and claimed she was having painful contractions, effectively shutting down any further conversation about her leaving. Though the contractions mysteriously subsided completely once Jake agreed to revisit the discussion another time, the manipulation was obvious and effective. As we lay in bed that night, I realized we had reached a critical point where normal family negotiation had completely failed. Rational conversation was being ignored. Clear boundaries were being trampled. My own home had been effectively hijacked, complete with changed locks I did not have keys to, and a pregnant woman planning to set up a permanent nursery in my living room. This is not going to improve on its own, I told Jake quietly in the darkness. They have absolutely no intention of respecting our wishes or our home. What other options do we have? He asked, sounding defeated and overwhelmed. I cannot physically remove my pregnant sister from the house. I was quiet for a long moment, considering our limited alternatives before responding. There is one option we have not considered yet. And in that moment, I made the decision that would change absolutely everything in our family relationships. The next morning, after Jake left for work, and while my father was still at his own house, I made a phone call I never imagined I would have to make. With trembling hands, I dialed the non-emergency police line and explained my unprecedented situation to the officer who answered. My father used an emergency key to move my sister-in-law into my home without my permission while I was at work, I explained carefully. I have repeatedly asked both of them to leave, but they refuse. My father has even changed the locks without giving me new keys. The officer asked several clarifying questions to understand the situation. Was my name on the property deed? Yes, along with my husband's name. Had I clearly communicated that they did not have permission to stay? Yes, multiple times in front of witnesses. Did I feel unsafe or threatened? Not physically, but my home. Security and privacy were being completely violated. This sounds like a civil matter with clear trespassing elements, the officer eventually concluded. We can send officers to your home to assist with removing unwanted occupants if you would like us to do that. I took a deep breath and confirmed yes, arranging for them to arrive that afternoon when I knew both Ashley and my father would be at the house. I did not call Jake to inform him of what I was planning to do. I knew he would try to talk me out of it, caught between loyalty to his sister and supporting me. But this had escalated far beyond a simple family disagreement. This was fundamentally about my right to safety, privacy, and autonomy in my own home. At 3:15 that afternoon, 2 police officers arrived at my house. I met them outside and provided my identification along with proof of ownership of the property. I explained the entire situation again in complete detail, including the changed locks and my father's refusal to return the original emergency key. When we entered the house together, Ashley was resting on the air mattress in the living room, and my father was in the kitchen preparing lunch using our groceries without permission. Their expressions when they saw the uniformed officers behind me ranged from complete shock to outright outrage. "What is going on here?" my father demanded, stepping forward aggressively. "Why did you bring police to a family matter?" "These homeowners have reported that you are on their property without permission," one of the officers explained calmly and professionally. "They have asked you to leave and you have refused. Is that an accurate description of the situation?" "This is absolutely ridiculous," my father sputtered indignantly. "I am her father, and that is her sister-in-law, who is 7 months pregnant with nowhere else to go. Family relationships do not override property rights, sir, the officer replied matter-of-factly. If the homeowners have asked you to leave their property and you have refused, that legally constitutes trespassing. Ashley had struggled to her feet by this point, her face displaying a mixture of indignation and theatrical distress. She cannot just kick me out like this. I am pregnant and have absolutely nowhere safe to go. Jake specifically said I could stay here. Is Jake your husband, ma'am? The second officer asked, turning to me. Yes, I confirmed. He is at work. Right now? This is a private matter between me and my daughter, my father interjected, moving closer to the officers in an intimidating way. You have no legal right to interfere in family business. Actually, sir, we do have that right when laws are being broken, the first officer corrected firmly. You need to gather your belongings immediately and leave these premises as requested by the homeowner. I am not going anywhere, my father declared defiantly, crossing his arms. This entire situation is completely absurd. Call Jake right now and he will tell you this is all just a big misunderstanding. The officers exchanged a quick glance, then turned back to my father with increased seriousness. Sir, we are giving you the opportunity to leave voluntarily and peacefully. If you continue to refuse, we will have no choice but to place you under arrest for criminal trespassing. Arrest? My father laughed incredulously. You would actually arrest a 62-year-old man for helping his pregnant daughter-in-law? The media will have a field day with that story. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. As my father continued to refuse to leave and became increasingly belligerent with the officers, they warned him multiple times that he would be arrested if he did not comply. When he still would not leave voluntarily and actually put his hand on one officer's arm while making an aggressive point, they had no choice but to restrain him. Richard Thompson, you are under arrest for criminal trespassing and interfering with a police officer, the first policeman stated formally while applying handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As they read him his complete Miranda rights, Ashley began screaming hysterically, clutching her belly in an overly dramatic fashion. You are literally killing my baby with all this stress. How could you do this to your own father, Emma? How could you do this to your innocent niece? The second officer immediately turned to Ashley with concern. Ma'am, do you require medical attention? Should we call an ambulance to check on you and the baby? No, she snapped, dropping the distressed act momentarily in her anger. I need you to stop arresting Richard and leave us alone immediately. Then you need to gather your essential belongings right now and leave these premises as requested by the homeowner, the officer stated firmly. You can arrange to return for the rest of your things at a mutually agreed upon time with the homeowners. Present. As my father was escorted to the police car in handcuffs, he called over his shoulder. You will regret this decision for the rest of your life, Emma. This is not what family does to each other. This is not how I raised you to behave. Ashley, realizing the officers were completely serious about removing her, began hastily gathering her purse, phone, and a few essential items. Jake will hear about every detail of this, she hissed at me venomously. Everyone in both our families will hear exactly how you had your own father arrested and threw your pregnant sister-in-law out onto the street like garbage. You have multiple comfortable places you can stay, Ashley, I reminded her, my voice steady despite the internal emotional turmoil. This situation was your choice and my father's choice, not mine. The officers helped ensure Ashley left the premises peacefully, strongly suggesting she call a friend or family member to pick her up rather than driving while emotionally upset. They also advised me to change all the locks again immediately, and thoroughly documented the entire incident in case of future problems or retaliation. After they left, I sat alone on my couch in the suddenly silent house, shaking uncontrollably with the aftermath of adrenaline and complex emotions. I had just had my own father arrested and forcibly removed from my home. It was a line I never imagined I would have to cross, but one that had become absolutely necessary when every other reasonable option had been completely exhausted. I called Jake immediately to explain what had happened before he heard a distorted version from someone else. His initial reaction was shock and anger. You had my sister and your father removed by police without even calling me first? He demanded. Emma, how could you make such a drastic decision completely alone? Because you were not making the decision. With me, I replied, my voice breaking with emotion. You kept trying to find compromises with people who had absolutely no intention of respecting our boundaries or our home. They changed our locks, Jake. They were planning a permanent nursery. This was never going to end unless we took decisive action. Jake was silent for a long moment before sighing heavily with resignation. I understand why you felt you had to do it, he finally said. But this is going to have serious and lasting consequences for all our family relationships. He was absolutely right. Within just a few hours, my phone was flooded with angry messages and voicemails from relatives on both sides of our families. Jake's parents called, furious that I had thrown their pregnant daughter onto the street during her time of greatest need. My aunts, uncles, and cousins expressed complete shock that I would have my own father arrested. Even Derek, Ashley's husband, called to angrily berate me for causing his wife additional stress during her pregnancy. The narrative being spread throughout both families was predictably one-sided and dramatically distorted. Cruel, selfish Emma had her elderly father arrested for simply trying to help her pregnant sister-in-law who had absolutely nowhere else safe to go. The crucial facts that they had moved in without permission, repeatedly refused to leave when asked, and changed my locks without consent were conveniently omitted from every retelling. Jake came home early from work, and we had a long, difficult, and emotional conversation about what had happened and how we would move forward from this point. For the first time since this crisis began, he admitted that he had been trying too hard to please everyone at the expense of our marriage and our basic boundaries. I should have been much more firm with Ashley from the very beginning, he acknowledged, with obvious regret. I was trying to be a supportive brother, but in the process, I was being a terrible husband to you. I am truly sorry, Emma. That evening, Jake called Derek directly and explained the entire situation from our complete perspective, including all the important details Ashley had likely omitted or distorted. To our surprise, Derek was significantly more understanding than we had expected once he heard the full, accurate story. I had no idea they had moved her in without your permission, Derek admitted with apparent embarrassment. Ashley told me you had invited her to stay and then suddenly changed your mind for no reason. I should have known there was much more to the situation. Derek revealed that he had only intended to stay away for 3 or 4 nights maximum, to let their argument about money cool down. He had actually been planning to return home when he received the frantic call about Ashley being evicted by heartless relatives. He agreed to pick up the remainder of her belongings the next day, and assured us she would be staying with him from now on, while they worked through their financial disagreements. My father, meanwhile, spent 18 hours in county holding before being released on his own recognizance. He refused to speak to me directly, communicating only through a brief text message that read, "I hope you are satisfied with your choice. This is not the daughter I thought I raised." The family fallout was significant, painful, and long-lasting. Jake and I found ourselves essentially isolated from large portions of both our extended families, portrayed as the villains in a situation where we had simply tried to protect our home, privacy, and boundaries. It was a harsh but valuable lesson that sometimes standing up for yourself comes at a considerable personal cost, but remains necessary for your long-term well-being and self-respect. The immediate aftermath of having my father arrested was every bit as difficult as I had feared it would be. For the first 2 weeks, I received daily calls, texts, or voicemails from various family members expressing their disappointment, anger, or outright disgust with my actions. Jake's mother refused to speak to me at all, communicating with her son only through terse text messages that deliberately excluded any mention of me. My father maintained complete silence, though I heard through my Aunt Carol that he was telling anyone who would listen about his ungrateful daughter who had him arrested for trying to help family. Ashley, now back home with Derek, had apparently transformed her experience into an epic saga of persecution and abandonment. According to Jake's cousin Mark, who remained neutral enough to keep us informed, she claimed I had threatened both her and the baby's safety, a complete fabrication that nevertheless gained significant traction among family members already inclined to take her side. The stress took a serious toll on our marriage as well. Although Jake had ultimately supported my decision, there was new tension between us that had not existed before. He temporarily moved into our guest room, saying he needed space to process everything that had happened and the family reactions we were dealing with. I spent many nights crying alone, wondering if standing up for our boundaries had cost me my marriage along with most of my family relationships. Recognizing that I needed professional help processing the trauma and overwhelming guilt, I sought out a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and boundary issues. Dr. Patricia Williams helped me understand that what had happened was not simply a family disagreement or miscommunication, but a fundamental violation of boundaries that bordered on emotional abuse. What your father and sister-in-law did represents a form of psychological manipulation and control, she explained during one of our early sessions. They used guilt, practical tactics like changing your locks, and emotional blackmail to override your autonomy and control your living space. Your response, while extreme, came only after multiple attempts to resolve the situation through normal, peaceful means. With Dr. Williams's guidance, I began working through the complex emotions surrounding the entire incident. The guilt over having my father arrested, the anger at being violated in my own home, the hurt of being characterized as the villain by family members for simply protecting reasonable boundaries. The fear that I had permanently damaged important relationships that could never be repaired. About 4 weeks after the incident, Jake and I finally had the breakthrough conversation we desperately needed. We sat on our back deck one evening, sharing a bottle of wine as the sun set behind our neighbor's oak trees. I have been doing a lot of thinking about everything that happened, Jake began slowly. At first, I was angry that you called the police, without consulting me. But the more I have reflected on the situation, the more I realize you had tried absolutely everything else first. We both had tried everything reasonable. I still feel terrible about having Dad arrested, I admitted honestly. I never wanted our family relationships to be damaged like this. But you gave them multiple opportunities to leave peacefully and respect our wishes, Jake reminded me gently. They refused every reasonable request. What else were we supposed to do? Let them completely take over our home indefinitely. That conversation marked a crucial turning point for us. Jake moved back into our bedroom that night, and we began the difficult process of rebuilding our sense of security and normalcy in our home. We immediately changed all the locks again and installed a comprehensive security system. We established clear, non-negotiable boundaries for all family interactions moving forward. No one except Jake and I would have keys to our home under any circumstances. All visits would be by explicit invitation only, and any request to stay with us would be thoroughly discussed and mutually agreed upon by both of us before any decisions were made. 3 months later, Ashley gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Sophia. Despite the ongoing family tension, Jake went to the hospital to meet his niece. I chose to stay home, recognizing that my presence would only create additional stress and conflict during what should have been a joyful time for the new family. When Jake returned home, he showed me photos of the baby, a tiny, beautiful bundle with Derek's brown eyes and Ashley's blonde hair. Ashley asked about you, Jake said carefully. She wanted to know if you would be coming to see Sophia anytime soon. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her that would depend entirely on her willingness to acknowledge what happened and take responsibility for her part in it, Jake replied. Ashley's response had been predictably defensive, but it represented the first time the possibility of any reconciliation had even been mentioned. It was a small opening, but an opening nonetheless. My father proved much more difficult to reconcile with. It took nearly 8 months before he agreed to meet with me, and only then with my Aunt Carol present as a neutral mediator. We met at a coffee shop downtown, the awkwardness between us immediately palpable as we took our seats at a corner table. I want to be clear that I did not come here to apologize, he stated immediately, his expression rigid and defensive. What you did was completely unforgivable, and I still believe you were wrong. I did not ask you here expecting an apology, I replied, keeping my voice calm despite the anxiety coursing through me. I asked you here because, despite everything that happened, you are still my father, and I would like to find some way to move forward constructively. The conversation that followed was difficult, painful, and at times heated. My father maintained that he had done absolutely nothing wrong, that helping family should always take precedence over what he called selfish concerns about privacy and personal space. I tried to explain as clearly as possible how his actions had felt like a fundamental betrayal of trust, respect, and my basic autonomy as an adult. When you used that emergency key to move Ashley in without asking me, you sent a clear message that my home, my space, and my feelings were completely irrelevant, I told him. When you changed my locks without giving me keys, you took away my security and control in my own house. Can you understand why that felt so violating and wrong? For the first time during our conversation, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross his face. I never intended to make you feel unsafe in your own home, he said slowly, as if the thought had never occurred to him before. I genuinely thought you were just being stubborn and selfish about helping Ashley when she needed support. It was never about whether I would help her, I explained patiently. It was about the fact that neither of you respected me enough to ask first and get my agreement. You made major decisions about my home and my life without my input, as if I were a child instead of an adult with the right to make my own choices. We did not resolve everything that day, or in the several difficult conversations that followed, over the next few months. But gradually, very slowly, my father began to acknowledge that he had overstepped appropriate boundaries, even if he still believed his intentions had been good. 7 months after our first reconciliation meeting, he finally returned the original emergency key, not the new ones, but the symbolic original key he had kept despite all the lock changes. I still believe family should help each other whenever possible, he said as he placed the key on the table between us. But I am beginning to understand that help should be offered and accepted, not forced on people without their consent. It was as close to an apology as I was ever likely to receive from him, and I chose to accept it for what it was, a small but significant step forward. As for Ashley, our relationship remained strained but gradually became civil over time. The birth and care of baby Sophia had shifted her focus considerably, giving her less time and energy for creating interpersonal drama. When I finally met my niece at her first birthday party, Ashley was polite but distant with me. Over the following months, as the intensity of our conflict faded and became less immediate, we slowly established a careful relationship built on clear boundaries and limited direct interaction. The most profound and lasting change, however, occurred within myself. Through this painful but necessary experience, I learned the vital importance of establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries, even with those closest to me. I discovered reserves of personal strength I had never known I possessed in standing up for myself despite the disapproval and anger of others. Most importantly, I came to understand that genuine family support must be built on a foundation of mutual respect and freely given consent, not obligation, manipulation, or emotional coercion. Jake and I emerged from this crisis with a significantly stronger marriage, having learned to communicate much more clearly about our individual needs and shared expectations. We became true partners in protecting our shared space and boundaries, no longer allowing ourselves to be manipulated by family drama, guilt trips, or unreasonable demands from relatives. Today, over a year after that shocking Thursday, when I came home to find my house invaded and my life disrupted, I can look back on the experience with the clarity that only distance and time can provide. What happened was undoubtedly painful and disruptive to our family relationships, but it also forced necessary and positive changes in how I relate to my family members and, more importantly, how I value and protect myself. I no longer apologize for having reasonable boundaries or feel guilty for protecting my space, privacy, and peace of mind. I have learned that loving your family does not mean allowing them to walk all over you or make decisions about your life without your input. Have you ever had to take drastic measures to protect your personal boundaries? How did you handle family members who refuse to respect your space and autonomy? I would love to hear your stories and experiences in the comments below. Please like this video if you have ever had to stand up for yourself against family pressure and emotional manipulation, and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complicated family dynamics and protecting your mental health. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, setting boundaries with family is not selfish or cruel. It is necessary for your well-being and self-respect.